And we're live. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment live stream. It's been a couple weeks since I've live streamed. It's been pretty busy here, getting my MBA and everything, and so I've been doing a lot of schoolwork, and I've also been working on that new video format, that tournament breakdown video, and so I just had to spend some time figuring out how that would work. So I'm really glad you guys are liking that video series, and I'm planning on putting out one of those pretty much every week. So I already got a bunch of people already on. We got Johnny Job, we got Bass and Newbie, Keith, Tiger Hit, from Edge to the Ledge, and John Bolton as always, Chase, Gary, and Ryan. What's up, guys? Good to see you all again, and I'm going to kind of change up the format tonight a little bit. I feel like it was getting maybe a little bit stale just doing lakes the entire time, so you can actually see the schedule for tonight on the middle right portion of the screen. So I'm going to start out tonight by talking about some fishing news that happened this week while people are still tuning into the live stream, and then I'm going to be looking at Lake Norman in North Carolina from 7:40 to 8 o'clock, and then I'm looking at Beaver Lake, talking about some fishing tackle that I like to use in the pre-spawn. Then we'll look at Tim's Ford Lake in Tennessee, and then I'm going to end it up with some, or finish off with some Q&A, and so hopefully in the last, hour of the stream, if you guys can start putting questions and just maybe put like Q&A in the title of your question, and then I'll cover that in the last 30 minutes. So that's kind of how the stream will work, and I'll go through all this again when more people get on. But awesome to see so many people already on. 33 people in the first minute, which is awesome. Let's see here. Let's go through. So Jacob says, love your videos. Thank you. Blackwater Kayaks, how's it going? Good to see you. Gabe, good to see you again. See here, Jordan Jones, good to see you. Beyond the Bounds, oh snap, NBA. Yeah, it's pretty tough, but it's been a really good experience so far. So Colton, good to see you. Tons of people getting on. What's up, Haley? Realistic Fishing, as always. Check out his videos, guys. Realistic Fishing's got some pretty funny content on YouTube. So anyways, I'll try to say hi to everyone here in a second, but let's jump into some tournament news, and hopefully we'll be able to get right into the stream. Right away, starting us off though, before we start, John Bolton with the $10 super chat. Thank you so much for the donation. And if any of you want to donate, just hit the little super chat icon on the bottom of the chat here, and you can donate to the stream. So thanks again, John, as always. And so let's start with some news. Okay, so in the news this week, last weekend the FLW Tour was on the Harris Chain in Florida, and Chris Johnston from Canada won this tournament with a 4-day total of 79 pounds 6 ounces. And the Harris Chain was fishing a little bit weird this last week. The fish were normally supposed to be on the beds in February, but for some reason the fish weren't really up in their spawning mode yet, and a lot of times, like last year in 2017, the FLW Tour fished on the Harris Chain, and those fish were kind of staging just off of the bank in like some shallow grass just off the bank, and the guy who won that tournament, he was catching them on a rattle trap, just fishing offshore with rattle trap in like 3 to 4 feet of water. But this year, Chris actually caught his fish out in the middle of the Harris Chain in Lake Harris, and caught him out in the middle of the lake throwing a rattle trap and a jerk bait. And so I'm actually going to be covering this lake this week in a new breakdown video that's coming out hopefully tomorrow, maybe Saturday. And I'm going to be breaking down exactly how he caught his fish and showing you the exact area using Navionics and Google Earth as always. So congratulations to Chris Johnston. Awesome victory for him. And so that's the first, or I think the second tournament now for the FLW Tour, second tournament in Florida. Next bit of news here, we have a BFL on Sam Rayburn Lake in Texas, and Kevin Lassone, I don't know how to say that, but hopefully I didn't butcher it too bad. But he won this Sam Rayburn tournament with a 2-day total of 53 pounds 1 ounce, and this is actually supposed to be a 3-day tournament, but it was canceled. The third day was canceled because of a fog delay, and Kevin had a 10-pound lead going into the tournament, the third day of the tournament, and you can see here he had a 10-pound lead over second place, so he was just crushing them. And what he said in his interview was that he was catching his fish in about 12 to 15 feet of water, fishing on the edge of one of these main river or main lake ledges on Sam Rayburn, and he was fishing a 3/4 ounce football jig on some stumps. And one thing that he said that was really interesting is that there were a lot of guys fishing around him. He was kind of like in this community hole area, but all of them were fishing a lot shallower and a lot faster than he was, but he's just basically focused on fishing a football jig, really slow against some stumps that were on the edge of this ledge, and he caught some giant bass, 225-pound bags. So congratulations to Kevin on that one. Let's see here. Let's get to the next little bit of news. Next up is a college fishing tournament that happened last weekend on Toledo Bend Reservoir. And I think it actually may have been 2 weekends ago. I'm not 100% on that. But the University of Wisconsin at Platteville won this tournament with a 2-day total of 41 pounds. And again, this was supposed to be a 3-day tournament, but the third day was canceled due to fog, and so these guys did a great job coming down from Wisconsin. I'm actually from Wisconsin, so it's cool to see them taking the title on a Texas lake, coming all the way down from Wisconsin and competing down here in the South. And the guys on that team were Hunter DeSplinter and Connor Chode. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his last name, but they did a great job. And what they said is kind of similar to what Kevin said on Sam Rayburn. These guys actually focused fishing offshore, and they fished in anywhere from 20 to 25 feet of water on the edge of a sharp drop that had grass on it. And so these fish were kind of staging on this sharp drop on the edge of this grass, and they were catching them on deep diving crankbaits and football jigs. And so similar deal to what Kevin was doing on Sam Rayburn. And again, they said that a lot of the college guys were fishing too shallow. They were up in that 10 to 15 feet of water or even shallower. And that's one thing I've noticed whenever I fish in Texas, even in the summertime. Those fish kind of like to stay a little bit deeper, especially the really big fish. And obviously there's days when they'll get up shallow, but a lot of times when I'm fishing in those big Texas lakes like Sam Rayburn and Toledo Bend, I like to stay in that 20 to 25 foot range, and that's where I seem to get the biggest bites. Last bit of news is actually again from the college circuit, and this time they actually announced where they're going to be holding the BASS College National Championship, and it's actually going to be on 10 Killer Ferry Lake in Oklahoma. And this is a lake that's pretty close to where I live, actually, and I love that lake. And it's going to be held July 19th through the 21st. And I'm actually kind of bummed I'm not fishing college tournaments anymore, because they, I don't know, they always seem to hold the tournament on my home lake when I'm not fishing the college series. For 4 years, they held it in Little Rock, and they fished Lake Maumelle. And if any of you watch my videos, I love Lake Maumelle. And then the year I entered college, they moved it, and they started fishing in Georgia. And now, right when I'm done with college, they move it back to Oklahoma, like an hour from my house. So, you know, that's how it goes, but it should be a really fun tournament. 10 killers loaded with giant smallmouth and largemouth, and they should be able to catch some big bags. So that's pretty much it for the news. I'm going to go through some comments here real quick, and then we're going to jump in to looking at Lake Norman. Let's see here. So first up, thanks Keith Burwell for the $10 donation. Really appreciate that. Good to see you, Go Navy. Ryan R. Ricky, good to see all of you guys. Let's see what Gabe says. I like your covering the tournament news. Appreciate that, Gabe. I really think that these tournament breakdowns are cool because I don't have to worry about going out and trying to catch these giant stringers and put together a pattern. I can just kind of break down what the pros are doing, and hopefully I can throw in my tournament or my personal fishing videos as well to show you guys that I actually know what I'm talking about. But right now, just with school, it's hard to go out and fish even on the weekends. I'm just studying all the time, and so hopefully these lake breakdown videos are kind of holding you guys over until the summer comes and I can start fishing a lot more. But let's see here. Thank you. Roman says you explained fishing God level. Appreciate that. Michael, my #1 channel, Tactical Bassin #2. Appreciate that. And John says, can you talk about the shad spawn in Kentucky Lake? I'm planning a guide fishing trip. And so he wants to know about the shad spawn. I'm actually going to be talking about the shad spawn a little bit in my lake breakdown on Harris Chain John, but I can talk about that in the Q&A as well a little bit later. Let's see here. Andy says, Tactical Bassin is a great channel, but for the overall knowledge of bass fishing, you can't beat Johnny Schultz. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate that. Tactical Bassin is a great channel, too, guys. They just focus a lot on the baits. They really get into the baits, and I think just because they're guides, they can't show off the areas they're fishing as much, and so I really like to add that element of talking about exactly where I'm fishing, and I give up all my spots on my videos. I never hold anything back, but I think that's what makes my channel good, and I think that's what helps people learn about fishing, not just talking about lures and tackle and things like that, but actually showing the exact spots that people fish, because that's the only way people can learn. So a ton of other stuff going on here. I'm going to try to get through all the comments and address them as much as I can. Hunter, he says he loved a lake breakdown on Smith Mountain Lake, and I actually covered Smith Mountain Lake on my last live stream, Hunter, so check that out. I actually went through it all for about 30 minutes on my last live stream. So I'm going to try to keep on schedule here. I don't want to get too lost in talking about the lakes and not see the chat and all that. I want to respond to everything you guys are saying, but I'm going to try to stay on schedule so we can get through as much content as possible, and then I'll try to get through everything in the Q&A that I miss. So if I'm not getting right to it right away, I apologize. So let's switch over now to our first lake of the night. Okay, so first up is Lake Norman in North Carolina, and Lake Norman is an awesome lake. The FLW Tour has fished here multiple times. I think the last time they fished there was in 2014 or maybe 2016, and Brian Thrift won that tournament skipping boat docks, and I know there's a lot of really good pros from the Lake Norman area. I think Andy Montgomery is from there, a couple other guys, and they are just renowned for fishing boat docks with jigs and just flipping docks all day on Lake Norman. And so we're coming up to the pre-spawn, which is pretty much the prime time to be skipping boat docks on any lake in the country. Those fish, those pre-spawn bass, are going to be moving up shallow, getting on those boat docks and staging on the little bit deeper boat docks. So I picked out a couple areas here on Google Earth on Lake Norman just to show you guys a couple of spots that I would hit, and then I'm also going to switch over to Navionics here in a second and show you guys some spots using a topographic map as well. So let's zoom in real quick here though to the first spot. Okay, so Lake Norman. First spot I'm looking at here is just this nice little pocket, and there's actually two creeks that I'm going to be looking at on Lake Norman today, and they both look pretty similar, and I'll kind of explain on Navionics why I like them, but there were the two creeks that stuck out right away when I started looking at this lake. And just kind of looking at this creek, it's really diverse. It has a lot of deep water up by the main lake, it has some dirty or shallow water back in the creek, and boat docks all over. And so if I was going to come fish this lake for the first time, I was never, I wouldn't have any, information from friends, and I was just going to try to figure out the lake by myself, I would start in this pocket. It's kind of on the lower end of the lake, but there's a little bit of dirty water, so it's that good mix of that deep clear water where the bigger fish normally sit and that little bit dirtier water, and it's a little bit easier to catch fish in dirty water because you can catch them on reaction baits and stuff like that. Just a little bit easier. So 91 people watching, Ryan just said. That's awesome. My top ever on the stream was 45, so that's blowing it out of the water. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. But anyways, so first up, let's just look at the mouth of this pocket. So as you can see, this water right here on the main lake is pretty clear. You can see it's that darker blue color. And then if we move kind of up the lake here, you can see that the lake gets a little bit dirtier. And as you can see here, this water is a little more brown. So you know that that's dirtier water. And it's kind of dirty back in this pocket here too, just a little bit. And so what I would do if I came into this pocket is I would start on some of these boat docks near the mouth of this creek. And the first set of boat docks that really stuck out to me was this little grouping right here in the back of this pocket. If you look at it, you can see that this lake's drawn down just a tiny bit, and so you can see that there's some shore and some bank visible. But there's no bank visible really on this stretch of docks, which means they're a little bit deeper. And so what I would do is I would start by fishing either a jerkbait, an Alabama rig, or a jig off the end of these boat docks, and just try to work my way from maybe the corner of this boat dock here, and I would just kind of work my way all the way back into this creek, back to about here. And I'll be working them again with like a suspending jerk bait, like something like this right here, just working it nice and slow, out in front of the boat docks, down the sides of the boat docks. I would, be making my casts across the tip of this boat dock right here. I would make casts down the sides of the boat dock on both sides as well. And if you look in here, actually, there's some really nice chunk rock down this bank as well. And so I might even pick up like a flat side crankbait or a little square bill if it's a sunny day. I'm trying to get this bait unhung from my mouse here. 1 second. Here we go. I would fish a little flat side crankbait or something down that bank. And right here, you can see that there's just, a bunch of these little rocky points. And I would just kind of work my way back into this little pocket and just see where the fish are at in this time of year. Just using a bunch of different baits. I might even, skip a little green pumpkin jig underneath the boat dock, stuff like that. And then if that didn't produce and I didn't get any fish in the mouth of this pocket, I would start moving back into the creek. And the first place I really like is this little point right back here. So you can see the water's getting a little bit muddier back in this creek. And the reason I like this point a lot is because you can actually see that it has a nice rocky bank right here. And you can also see that there's one isolated boat dock off this point. And for whatever reason on lakes where there's boat docks, the banks with just one boat dock on it seem to be the best for me. I fish a lot of boat docks on Lake Hamilton and a lot of places in Arkansas, and whenever I can find a bank with just one boat dock on it, especially if it's this nice point like this, that's just a killer spot. So this is definitely one of the docks I would hit, and again, I would probably just crank this point with a flat side crankbait and then skip this dock with a jig. Moving a little bit further back in this creek, there's a couple spots I like here. First, there's this really nice riprap on a little island here, and this looks like a great place to crank with a crankbait, maybe drag a jig down these rocks, especially if you have a sunny day and that water's warming up. I also like just these boat docks right off to the side here. They look like really good staging spots for these bass. They're right in the mouth of one of these spawning pockets, and I would just skip these boat docks. And then last but not least, I would actually move all the way into the back of this pocket. Let's say I didn't get any bites on these deep, clear boat docks, didn't get anything on these maybe a little bit medium depth docks in a little bit of stained water. I would move all the way back to these shallow docks, and the water back in here is a little bit dirtier, and these two docks right here really stuck out to me. If you look here, there's a nice little creek that runs in, and there's probably going to be a little bit of water flow coming from that creek, especially if there's any rain. And I bet that these docks right here on the corner of this creek mouth are just going to be loaded up in the pre-spawn, especially when you get up into March. And so I would be fishing right around these docks, again, skipping them with a 3/8 ounce black and blue jig, maybe a tube, something like that, skipping underneath these boat docks, maybe fishing a little crankbait. So that's what I would be doing, and I think that that's probably going to at least help me start finding a pattern here on Norman. Another place I would hit is this other creek kind of up the lake, and it's kind of a similar looking creek to what we just saw, and it's a little bit dirtier, but what I would do is I would just come into here and I would fish very similar spots to what I just looked at. Again, some nice boat docks on the edge of this little point that sticks out, so you can see there's a little bit of deeper water that probably runs in here. These docks are a little bit deeper. Brian Barthelt, he just did a $20 donation. Thank you so much, Brian. Really appreciate that. 104 people watching, guys. This is crazy. This is awesome. So, anyways, really good little spot right there. Again, moving back in this creek, here's another area where you have a little creek or a little chute, and then there's some nice boat docks right on the tip of that. That looks like a great area. And then even moving further back in this creek, you have a nice little isolated boat dock off this point. So again, you kind of get a feel for the type of spots I'd be looking at, and that's pretty much all we can tell just by looking at Google Earth. So let's switch over to Navionics now and see what's happening there. Okay, Navionics. So we're back over here. We're on Lake Norman. So let's head in these creeks, and let me explain why I picked the two creeks I did on Lake Norman here. So first up, the reason I like these creeks is because they're a little bit flatter than the rest of the creeks in the area on Lake Norman. If you look at a lot of these creeks in here, they have these really steep drops. So you have these nice steep channels that run into them, and while that's really good, a lot of times in the winter, a lot of times these steep creeks, and the reason you can tell they're steep is because if you look at these banks, there's really thick lines kind of stacked right together, these dark lines. That means it's a sharp drop right off the bank. And so as you can see, there's a lot of lines that are kind of stacked close together in these creeks. Again, right here, these lines are stacked really close together. So that means that it's a sharp drop. And while those pockets can be good a lot of times in the winter, in the spring, these bass want to get on flatter, tapering banks. And if you look here, these banks have a lot more spread out contour lines. You can see the contour lines are a lot more spread out, and that's the kind of stuff I want to look for in the springtime. Those flatter, shallower pockets. And so if you kind of look at some of the areas I was looking at, first up back in this creek, I think it was over, yeah, I'm in the right spot. Back over here, yeah, right here. This is the first little pocket I was looking at. So you can see you got that nice kind of flat bank, but there's some deeper water with this creek channel swinging in right up against this pocket, and these docks right here have that creek channel swinging right up against them. And I bet these docks right here are going to be dynamite when the fish get in that pre-spawn mode. Again, we have more docks right here where that creek channel swings in. You can tell it's a creek channel because it goes from 43 feet right here, and it goes up really shallow on both sides, but the water stays deep right in the center of this pocket. So there's a little bit of a creek channel that swings in up against these banks. So these docks right here, again, are going to be dynamite. Another spot that we looked at was this isolated dock off this little point. And again, you can see we have a nice flat spread out contour line pocket here, so the bass are going to want to move up into this pocket to spawn, but before they start spawning, they're going to want to sit right on the edge of that spawning area in some deeper water. And as you can see, there's some contour lines that are really tight together here, so there's a steep drop from 0 feet or 1 foot of water down to 20 feet of water, and that dock is sitting right on that drop. And then that contour lines kind of start to spread out as you move back into this pocket, and the water starts to get a little bit shallower, and so those bass are going to sit right on that transition from the deep water to the shallow water. And that's just a little channel swing is what we call it, and that looks like a dynamite spot to catch fish here on Lake Norman. Let's see here. Last spot that we looked at was this little stretch of docks right here, and again, same exact reason that I like these docks before. You have a nice steep drop down these docks, and then shallow water close by. You can see it's really shallow water, but steep, deep water close to shallow water, that's what you're looking for in the pre-spawn. Let's take a look at this other creek I checked out, and again, same deal. As you can see, this creek has really spread out contour lines. The banks have a kind of a nice taper to them. They probably have like a nice 45-degree bank on them. They're not super steep like the pockets just around the corner. So you can see those are really steep pockets. The contour lines are really tight together, and the fish get on those obviously, but they're just not going to hold as many fish in my experience as these flatter pockets. And a lot of times too, like on Lake Norman, there's a lot of spotted bass, and these steep pockets are really good when you're targeting spotted bass and looking for spotted bass areas. But when you're tournament fishing on Lake Norman, you need to be catching largemouth. Those are the bigger fish, they weigh more, and those largemouth are going to get on these shallower, flatter banks. So here's one of those banks that I was looking at. I can kind of tell right away that this is going to be a good bank, just because if you look off this little pocket here, there's a nice ridge that runs out in the center of this lake, and there's another ridge that runs here, and a ditch runs right up against this bank. So you can see it's shallow water on this side, shallow water on this side, forming two ridges, and this creek channel forms a ditch that runs right up against this bank. And these fish are basically going to follow this creek channel in from the main lake, back up against this bank, and they're going to start staging right on this deeper dock to move up onto the shallower water and spawn. Another really good bank is this creek channel swing, or this transition bank, where again you have shallow water, transitioning to deep water just along these docks. These docks are going to be really good. So those are pretty much the type of areas I'm going to be looking for on Lake Norman in the pre-spawn. You could probably catch some fish too a little bit deeper, like let's say off these points. Might be able to catch some fish off some of these small points like this, fishing a shaky head or a swim bait offshore. Again, here's another nice little point. You might be able to target some fish there, but from what I've seen on television and read on Lake Norman, the biggest bags are going to be caught in the pre-spawn up shallow around docks, flipping, stuff like that. So that's my breakdown of Lake Norman. I'm going to go over to the comments over here to make sure you guys aren't throwing something at me and want me to ask a question. And then I'll get back to the next lake pretty quick here. Wow, so many comments. This is awesome. So let's see here. Bruce, he asked question. So the bass will be spawning before the water level goes up. How does that affect the spawning places? So from my experience, a lot of times the bass, when the water is still low on a lake, like say it's at Winter Pool and it still has to rise like 2 or 3 feet, the fish will actually spawn a little bit deeper. They'll spawn out off the bank. So like if we're looking at this bank here, instead of spawning right up on the bank, let's say right on these docks right here, instead of spawning right up on these docks, they'll sit right off the bank in maybe 2 to 3 feet of water. And a lot of times on these clear lakes like Lake Norman, the sun still penetrates down 6 feet deep, and so they can still spawn out there deeper. And so a lot of times the water will come back up and there'll still be fish spawning out in 6 or 7 feet of water, and guys just completely miss those fish. So what I'll do is I'll actually take a Carolina rig a lot of times and fish off the bank and put my boat out in 20 feet and cast all the way up to the shore and drag that Carolina rig back to the boat. And that's the pattern I use on Lake DeGray all the time, because that exact thing that you're talking about, Bruce, happens all the time. The lake will be down 4 or 5 feet on Lake DeGray. The bass will make their beds up in a foot of water, and then the water will come up and they'll keep spawning in the same spot, but now the water is 5 or 6 feet over their bed, not a foot. So hopefully that answers the question. Let's see here. We have couple guys. Brendan Long, he said, I won a small club tournament on Lake Norman fishing a shaky head around docks. So thanks for letting us know that, so that people know I'm not completely crazy with this whole dock thing. Let's see here. Tons of people saying hi. Let's see here. Leap Bass Stick, good to see you. H Moob, is that how you say that? He says, caught an 8-pounder from watching your videos. Keep it up. Thank you so much. Ryan R says, nice. Man, see here. John says there's been a ton of rain in Kentucky, and it's the same here in Arkansas. It's super flooded. And that's really going to affect the fishing, I think, in the next couple of weeks. But when the lakes flood, a lot of times the bass start moving up shallower. And especially if it's a warm rain, those bass will get up in 2 to 3 feet of water, up in those like flooded trees, up around flooded houses, things like that, picnic tables. And so if your water temperatures are getting above 50 degrees and your lake's really flooded, I'd be going up shallow and fishing a spinner bait, maybe fishing a jig, flipping up shallow. And I might also try to fish the old bank line with like a Carolina rig. Those can be 2 really good ways to catch fish. Let's see here. Tons of questions. I'm trying to get back to all these. Gabe said DeGray Lake came up over 20 feet in 11 days in Arkansas. That's crazy. I didn't know that did that. Let's see here. Tons of comments. So, and then Slacknor, he just said, still frozen in northern Idaho. Great tips. Looking forward to get out. So yeah, I know a lot of guys are still frozen up there up north, so hopefully some of my videos are helping you guys shake off the fishing bug just a little bit. But anyways, I'm gonna get back to it now, and I'm gonna try to cover another lake here real quick and keep up with the chat and everything, so hopefully that works out and I'm not missing anything important. So let's get to the next lake. Okay, next up is a lake right in my backyard, Beaver Lake. And this is a notorious fishery on the FLW tour because it always seems to be a really tough fishery. And it's a lake they fish every single year on the FLW tour. And a lot of guys hate it because they have to fish it every year and they just can't figure it out. And Beaver Lake is a weird lake. I fished it a lot. And it seems like every time I go out there, I catch them completely different, look in completely different areas, fishing completely different baits almost every time I go, especially year to year. And basically, Beaver Lake is what people call a pattern lake. It's a lake where you have to figure out what the fish are doing on a given day and then just try to duplicate that around the lake. And a lot of times people get caught up because they'll catch fish one day on a pattern or on a spot, and they come back to that same spot and throw that same bait the next day, and they'll zero. They won't catch any fish. And then you hear it all the time on these FLW tour events. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of break down some of the areas I like to fish on Beaver Lake that are good areas for me, and then kind of talk to you about how to pattern a lake where the fish don't seem to be sitting in the same spot every time you go fishing, where they kind of move a lot. So hopefully there's some lakes in your areas that are like this, and you can kind of apply this advice to your home lake. So first up, let's talk about the most popular and I think the most productive area of Beaver Lake, which is the Prairie Creek area. And just a kind of a heads up on what Beaver Lake looks like, you have a lake where the river is actually on the bottom end of the lake. Normally you think that the top end of the lake is the dirty water section, or the I guess like the shallower section of the lake, but on Beaver Lake the shallower end is actually the southern end of this lake. And so if you go down the lake, you can see this water's super muddy. It's really dirty, it's really shallow, and there's a lot of good shallow water cover for flipping and all kinds of stuff in here. And then as you move up to the midsection of the lake, you can see it's really clear, super deep. In this area, you get up to 100, 150 feet of water, and the water clarities can get 4 to 5 feet deep. And this is a really popular part of the lake because you get that mixture of that clean and that dirty water, and it makes it a little bit easier to catch those largemouth. But it seems like the better quality largemouth on Beaver Lake like to stay near clear water. There's still a lot of good fish caught in the dirty end of this lake, but most of the fish, or most of the tournaments that are won in the midsection or the lower end of the lake, just because that's where the biggest fish in the lake live. And then finally, you have the lower end of the lake. This is near the dam, and this part of the lake is super clear. You have like 15 feet of visibility, and this is where you get a lot of smallmouth and spotted bass. And there's some big smallmouth in Beaver Lake, actually. And a couple of years ago, one of the FLW2 anglers won a tournament fishing for smallmouth on the lower end. But over the last like 5 or 6 years, it seems like every person who's won on the FLW tour has been fishing around the Prairie Creek area. A couple years ago, Matt Airy won out here 2 years in a row fishing Prairie Creek. I know that the last year Johnny McCombs won kind of near the Prairie Creek mid-lake area, and there are a couple other guys that won in this area as well. So let's kind of go in here and see why this area of the lake is so good. So first up, one thing you'll notice when you look at Beaver Lake is that it all looks pretty much the same. Everything looks pretty much identical to the naked eye. What you have is a lot of rocky banks with standing timber, and you can go around the entire lake and it looks completely the same everywhere you go. Like, there's not much difference on any of these banks. I mean, you have some areas where there's a little more chunk rock, or where there's a little bit bigger boulders, like here on this main stretch, but for the most part, it's the same throughout the entire lake. And so when you have a lake that fishes like that, it's less about what the bank looks like, and it's more about what the contour lines are underneath the lake. So I'm going to show you guys a couple areas here using Google Earth, and then we're going to zoom in using Navionics to explain why they're good. So one area that I've really caught fish in the past is actually back in this creek, and if we take this lake back down to 2006 using the tool up here in the top of Google Earth, you can go to this little clock with an arrow pointing backwards, and you can click it and it'll show you aerial footage, and you can zoom back to past aerial footage. And if we go back to 2006, you can see when Beaver Lake was actually drawn down a little bit, and it's actually, is there a better, here we go, I think 2009, it was drawn down here too, and so you can see when the lake is actually low. And if we go into this creek here, you can see that there's a nice little transition where you go from a deep, steep bank. That bank is really steep. You don't see any of the bank out of water, and then it flattens out, and you can tell it's flat because this water is actually out of water. You can see the bottom, and this little transition from deep to shallow water has been a really good spot for me over the years when the bass start to move up to spawn. And I'll catch them fishing a jig and a tube kind of casting up onto the bank and dragging it off 10 to 15 feet off the bank. And a lot of times these fish will just stage on this bank before they move back into these pockets or move up on this bank to spawn. So that's one area that's been really good to me. Another area that I've really caught some fish on this lake is actually back in, let's see, in this creek right here. It's just up from the one we just looked at, and it's this bank right here. If you notice, you can see that there's some really good chunk rock down this bank, really big boulders, and this is the type of stuff that bass love to get on. These giant boulders are going to hold heat when it gets sunny, and they're going to, the heat's going to draw bait fish. It's going to draw some sun or some crawdads up on this bank. And so what I do on this bank right here is actually throw either a 1/2 ounce football jig, and I'll work it really slow down those rocks, and I'll fish it all the way out to 15 to 20 feet of water, or I'll throw a flat side crankbait like a storm wigglewort or a strike king KVD 1.5 flat like this, and I'll crank these really rocky banks. And right now, actually, or last year actually, the one of my friends was catching 18 to 20 pounds a day fishing a crankbait in this area of the lake, just down these banks in this creek. And like I said before, he was catching his fish on different spots every single time you go fishing. Like one week he would catch them really well in this creek, and then the next week he would come down and they'd be chewing in this creek down here, and it has a similar look. Again, you can see it has some nice big boulders in it, but there's a lot more standing timber in this creek. And so for whatever reason, that next week this creek was really good, and then he couldn't get bit on either of these creeks the next time he went, and he was catching them down the lake fishing in this creek. So it's really weird. Beaver Lake's a weird lake in that the pattern will be the same every single day, which is fishing a crankbait down rocky banks, but the creek that you catch him in will be completely different every day. And so if that happens on your lake where you go out on a tournament day and you are crushing them in practice on a flat side crankbait, fishing down rock on a certain spot, and they just stop biting, there's two things you can do. If it's like Beaver Lake, what I would do is I would keep throwing that crankbait, but I would just change locations. And I would look on Navionics and look on Google Earth and find areas that look similar to that area and try to duplicate the spot. And that always seems to work for me on Beaver Lake, and it helps me find some active groups of fish that are biting. The other thing you can do is you can actually go to these areas, and let's say you're cranking down this little bank here and you're catching them shallow on a crankbait. Well, if that stops working for whatever reason, a lot of times if you're fishing an area and there's like a cold front, those fish will pull off the bank and they'll get a little bit deeper out here off this point, and you can catch them dragging a football jig, fishing a deep diving crankbait, a Carolina rig, whatever it would be, off these points, and just fish a little bit slower and just fish a little bit deeper. And that always seems to, one of those two patterns or those techniques always seems to help me find and relocate fish when they stop biting in practice. And actually one of the things I'm going to be doing hopefully here this summer is doing a lot of practice and tournament videos where I'm going to be showing you guys how I pre-fish for tournaments and how I adapt in a tournament if I have a great practice and then I go out tournament day and the fish just aren't biting. And that's kind of the reality of tournament fishing. Most of the time you have a stellar practice and the tournament just sucks. And so what I try to do is I structure my practice so that I have a lot of different areas just in case the fish change and I have to completely abandon what I was catching them on in practice and move to new water. So I'll be making videos about that. That's something I feel like I'm pretty good at, and it's something that I've kind of perfected over the years. I fished like 150 tournaments in my life, and so haven't done a lot lately, but hoping to get back into it. So that's just some Google Earth stuff. Not really too much to look at. So let's switch over to Navionics and get a little bit better look at Beaver Lake here. Okay, so let's move over here to Navionics, and we're at Beaver Lake. So let's take a look at some of these creeks again and kind of explain why I think that they're good. So if we move back into this creek here, this is that first creek I showed you, and we'll move all the way to the back here. And I said that there was a nice little transition from a steep bank up to a shallow bank. And you can tell right away on these contour lines that's what's happening. So you can see here these contour lines are really close together, indicating a steeper bank. And then they start to spread out and get wider apart, and that means the bank's shallowing out. And there's a ton of places on Beaver Lake that look just like this. And so what I did actually one tournament is I came into this little pocket and I shook off like 7 or 8 fish in practice, and I was like, oh man, this is going to be the juice. I'm going to crush them in this spot. And this is for a state tournament that I was fishing for, a junior state tournament, and I pulled into this pocket and I fished it in the morning and never got a bite. Didn't get a single bite for like an hour of fishing, and I was, a little bit spun out, but I was like, okay, well, they weren't biting in this pocket, so let's completely change up and let's try a new pocket that looks similar but in a different part of the lake. And so I actually ran back into which pocket was it? It was this pocket right here. Which one was it? This is a long time ago, guys. I need to find this pocket. Right here. This pocket right here, running north. So I ran out of this pocket, and I ran down the lake, and I looked on Navionics and found this nice little pocket looks similar. And as you can see here, it's a really similar setup where you have a steep bank where the contour lines are really close together, and then they start to spread out. And so it goes from steep to shallow. And I actually abandoned all the spots I fished in practice. I'd never fished this spot before in my life, and I pulled in here and ended up catching 3 keepers, boom, 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 right off the spot. And I think I finished second in that tournament. And so that's pretty good for like a 13 or 14-year-old. I probably could have maybe done a little bit better now, but I tried a couple different areas too before getting to this one. But I just tried to duplicate what I was running in the practice, and it worked out. And that's kind of the lake that Beaver is. Even though the first spot I was fishing where I crushed them in practice wasn't working, I found a similar area, duplicated the look of the spot, and ended up catching some fish. A couple other spots that I like to fish in the pre-spawn out here on Beaver. One of them is actually at the mouth of this pocket right here, and it's a, is it over here or is it over here? It's over here. It's a little hump that's out in the middle of this pocket, and if you come out here you can actually see that there's a nice little creek channel that runs up right against this point, and this is a deeper spot. This is one of my honey holes out here when the fish are getting up here and getting in that early pre-spawn mode, but they're still sitting out in like 30 feet of water. And if you look right here, here's some nice contour lines. There's a creek channel that runs in here and another creek channel that runs in here, and there's a point, and it's about 40 feet deep, and there's actually a little bit of a rock pile right off this point. And I'll sit out here with a drop shot and a football jig and fish right off the end of this point. And what the fish will do is they'll stage on this point coming out from the main lake before they move back into this pocket to spawn. So that's like an early pre-spawn deal, and that's probably what I'd be fishing, or what I would try to fish if I went out there tomorrow. But another spot like that is actually right across the way here. Another little hump, similar deal. You have a nice creek channel that runs in here, and this little hump right here has always been a really good producer for me over the years. You can sit over the top of it with a drop shot. I've catch smallmouth, spotted bass, all kinds of stuff off this spot. So really good area there. And then the last area that I love to fish on Beaver Lake that always seems to produce some good fish is this pocket down the lake here. And similar to like what I was talking about on Norman, this is a little bit flatter pocket than the other ones we looked at. If we go back up the lake, kind of up to this Prairie Creek area, you can see that these pockets are pretty steep. They have deep water running right up against the bank. You can see those lines are really thick against this bank. And these steep pockets can be really good on Beaver. But a lot of times when you get that warmer water and the fish are getting ready to spawn, like right in the beginning of March, the fish like to get on these, again, shallower, flatter pockets. And this area in here has some really good offshore road beds and some really good creek channel swings that run in. And I've caught some giants fishing off these little road beds. You can see them all crisscrossing here, and right on this like channel swing right through here, and I'll catch them on a Carolina rig and a deep diving crankbait back in this creek. And it's just a really good looking area. There's a lot going on here, but basically if you look, you have a nice creek channel that swings in and follows right here, and it runs right across the mouth of this pocket, and you have a nice steep bank right here. This is a spawning pocket. This whole creek back here is a nice spawning area, and these fish will just stage right in front of this creek channel, right off this point and right off this point, and I can crush them on Alabama rig, jerkbait, Carolina rig, stuff like that. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking at. Let's see here. One more spot that I want to talk about was further up this lake, and I'm actually going to switch back over to Google Earth for this because I forgot to talk about this. One other pattern that's really good on Beaver Lake is shallow water buckbrush, and especially when the lake is just starting to come back up. Let me transition over here. When the lake's just starting to come back up, these fish love to get on shallow buckbrush, and so if we zoom in to this little creek back in here, you can actually see that there's some isolated trees out here in the middle of this flat, and these trees, while they might look deep, they're only in like 2 to 3 feet of water. And what happens is that these fish will sit, and there's actually a creek channel that runs right up against this bank, and they'll sit right on the edge of this creek channel and pull up into these trees and then kind of work their way back into this flat and sit on these isolated trees. And you can catch them on spinner baits and flipping up in this dirty water on Beaver Lake, even when the water temperature is like 55 degrees. So that's kind of a sneaky pattern that guys like to use on sunny days on Beaver Lake. And normally it's not a big or a numbers pattern, it's one of the big fish patterns. And you can normally come down here and catch a 5 or 6 pounder in this type of area on Beaver Lake. So let's go back over to the chat real quick, and then we're going to do some fishing tackle stuff here for about 20 minutes. So let me read through some comments here. Still 80 people on. That's awesome, guys. Really appreciate all the support here. Let's see here. Michael says, can you look at a few bedding spots up the White River on Beaver? I think that this, actually I don't know where the White River is. I don't know if this is White River. I'm not very good with names of creeks and everything like that on this lake, but I don't know if this is White River. If it is, then a couple areas I know I've caught spawning bass in the past on are some of these shallow pockets right in here. There's some really good buckbrush and some really good sand timber, and you can actually see there's like some lay down logs, like log jams, and these fish will pull up into these log jams and down these banks, and you can catch them flipping down these banks really well. Again, another spot right here, these log jams, and you can catch them off those isolated trees, and I've caught some really good fish flipping that kind of stuff. So that's one of the spawning areas of fish up this river. Maybe that is the White River. If it's not, maybe that can relate to the stuff you were talking about. Let's see here. John says, I kind of like how much time Johnny spends preparing for these live streams. He's very thorough. Thanks, guys. I try to be pretty thorough. I try to get through a lot of spots and try to give you some insight onto what I'm thinking. If you guys want me to slow down, though, or maybe talk about something different, leave some comments and let me know what you think. I'm just going off of what I kind of enjoy talking about. I just have a blast doing these live streams and talking to you guys about fishing. And so if you have any questions, again, shoot them in the chat. If you have anything you want me to talk about specifically, throw it in the chat, and I'm going to try to get to as many comments and talk about as many different things you guys want to talk about. It doesn't matter exactly what I care about or what I want to talk about. It's more about what you guys want and what you find beneficial. So let's see here. Gabe says puts in some time, appreciate that. John says, stupid question, but is it called Beaver Lake because of beaver dams? I actually don't know. I wouldn't say it's a stupid question because it might be 100% true, but hopefully someone can maybe figure that out in the comments and let John know. Peck says, we'll see this young man on ESPN or a fishing network one day. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Peck. Appreciate that. And Ryan says, I love buckbrush fishing in 2 feet of water. It's so much fun. I love that. Love that bite. It's really good. Colton says, first live stream watched, and it's great. I'm glad you enjoy it. And Terminator Fishing says, what's your favorite sea rig soft plastic in the spring? Carolina rig soft plastic. And the two that I love the most are a lizard, like a Zoom lizard, or a baby brush hog. Those are my two go-to Carolina rig baits in the spring. and there's a couple different lizards I throw. One is that Zoom lizard, and the other is a Strike King Elaztec lizard. It's actually like a floating, stretchy lizard. I think that Z-Man makes one too, but they just float up, and I like that when I'm fishing around grass. But then if I'm just fishing brush and stuff, I'll throw a normal, just like a watermelon red flake lizard if it's clear water, or a green pumpkin lizard if it's dirty water. So that's the kind of stuff. Ryan Johnson says, great shows, loving it. Glad you guys are liking this. Let's see here. Suckner says, I'm not sure what we was talking about, but he said something about Crotch Creek. I don't know what that's about, but maybe I'll try to go back to the comments and figure that one out. It's probably a good story behind that one. But anyways, so what I'm going to do now, guys, I'm actually going to take a break from looking at the lakes. I just threw a ton of information out there really quick. And so what I'm going to do is actually go look through some fishing lures on Tackle Warehouse and talk about some lures I would fish this time of year. And I don't really like making like fishing lure videos, like my top 5 fishing lures or whatever, just because there's so many people making those videos, and like you said, there's people like Tactical Bassin who are experts at that kind of stuff, and I feel like I know how or which baits are good too, but I want to focus more on making videos about locations and where to find fish as opposed to fishing lures. So that's where I put my time. But I'm going to try to do this fishing lure segment in my live streams every week, just to kind of give you guys an idea of what baits I'm fishing. But CJ Fisherman says, how do you recognize creek channels on Navionics? If you want to actually figure that out, there's a video on my channel that's called How to Find Fish Using Creek Channels Year-Round, Topographic Maps Explained. There's a video, or there's a picture, it says find fish year round, and it's on my channel. You can find it on there, and it explains exactly how to find creek channels using Google Earth and Navionics. It shows you how to read the contour lines, everything. And so people seem to really like that video, and if you haven't seen it, check it out. It goes in as deep of a explanation as I can on how to find creek channels using a topographic map, and it kind of explains what they are too. And Colton says, what would you recommend for a pond this time of year? That's actually a great segue, so let's switch over to Tackle Warehouse and see what kind of baits I'd be throwing in ponds and in lakes this time of year. Okay, over here at Tackle Warehouse, and first thing I wanted to do actually to kind of break it up is I wanted to look at some of the featured new lures on Tackle Warehouse. I always find these lures hilarious because it always seems like I'm expecting to find this brand new radical bait that comes on Tackle Warehouse's new page, and sometimes it happens, but I'd say like 90% of the time it's just another knockoff or copy of a popular bait. For example, we have this Beast Coast Fishing Chaos X swim bait. I mean, looks like a really good bait. I'm not knocking the bait at all, but it looks very similar to a lot of the other baits, like Osprey style baits that I've seen out there. We have the Booyah's version of the Teckle Sprinkler Toad, which is interesting. $9 price points. That could be really good. We have another blade bait by Molex. They make some good blade baits, but these baits have been around for years. Another rattle trap. Can never have too many rattle traps, I guess, on the market. We have a speed worm style bait from Reaction Innovations. Some new jig heads. A couple new spinning reels. Some of these baits for the Demiki rig, or these jig heads for Demiki rigs. And then another swim bait. So I don't know. Let me know, guys, in the chat what you think of all these new baits that come out. I always think it's a little bit ridiculous, like when a company brings out another lipless crankbait. I mean, I know that each company likes to have their own bait so that you can stay in their like fishing lure brand or whatever it is, but I don't know. There's just so many baits. Like, let's just take a look at these at lipless crankbaits for a second, because it's actually ridiculous how many lipless crankbaits there are in the market. And I don't know about you, but I don't know if I can tell the difference between, I mean, let's look at this. There's 5 per row. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 rows. So that means that there's there's 65 different types of lipless crankbaits on the market. And I don't know if any of them are better than the other. They probably all are a little bit different, but that's so many. so many different types, and I don't really know. I don't think the fish can tell the difference between like a Bill Lewis rattle trap, a striking red-eye shad, an Excalibur. I mean, there's, again, slight differences between all of them, and I know that there's probably guys in the chat who are going to be diehards on one way or another, but it's a little bit ridiculous. 65, that's crazy. Anyways, since we're on rattle traps, that's actually one of the baits that I would fish Colton right away if I was fishing a pond. And the one that I really like is the striking red-eye shad. That's just the one that I've fished for years. And what I would actually fish, this is the tungsten 2-tap. We want the normal red-eye. What I actually would fish in this red-eye would be the 1/4 ounce size. So there's the 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, and the 1/4 ounce, and I would actually fish the 1/4 ounce in this red-eye shad. And a lot of times in ponds the water's pretty shallow, and so I'd fish that 1/4 ounce. And if the water's really dirty, I would fish a gold black back color. And then if there's a little bit clear water, I would be fishing a chili craw or a orange craw color red-eye. So maybe this is the silent. I'm kind of missing all the. There's 3 different red-eye shads, which is kind of weird too. But here we go. This is the normal red-eye shad. Anyways, so as you can see, here's 1/4 ounce, 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce. But I would be fishing like a Rayburn red, Delta red, something like that, or a gold black back. And I'd fish that I kind of cast it out all the way out in the middle of the pond, and I would either kind of let it sink to the bottom and yo-yo it back if there's not much mud or dirt on the bottom, or if it's, there's not a lot of sticks and stuff down there for you to get hung up on. And then if there's grass, I would actually be fishing that bait over the top of the grass. So that's like one of my go-to spring baits when the fish are first moving up out of their winter patterns to move up shallow. And that red-eye shad or like a Bill Lewis rattle trap, stuff like that, those baits are amazing in February and March, and you can catch fish even when the water temperatures are in the 40s, burning a rattle trap up in 2 to 3 feet of water. And it's one of those techniques that's overlooked on a lot of lakes, especially deep clear lakes, but you can catch fish in gin clear water throwing a lipless crankbait just up on bare banks with just some rock and stuff on them. So that's one thing I would definitely check out. Also, shoot some questions if you guys have some questions about tackle, and I can just keep doing that. But like Ryan says, what swim bait are you putting on your A-rig? Let's go over here and look at some swim baits. So the couple I've tried that I really like, actually I'll just pull these up here, that might be better. One of them is a Kitech, and I really like this Fat Impact 3.8, is it 3.8? 3.3 inch, the 3.3 inch Kitech Fat Impact. That's one of my favorite baits. I'll put 4 of the 3.3 inch on the outside wires, and then on the inside wire I'll put a 3.8 inch. And these baits are just really good. They put off a really good vibration, and it's a little bit more subtle than throwing a big swim bait on the back. And normally my go-to colors are the Bluegill Flash or the French Pearl, and I normally just stick with those 2 colors. And again, I'll just rig up 4 of those on the outside, and I'll just use like normal shaky head hooks. I get some shaky head hooks from my local tackle shop, and they're super cheap, and so I really like that. And then if I'm fishing a little bit or a lake that has bigger fish, or the fish are really aggressive, instead of fishing these finesse swim baits, I'll actually switch over to fishing a you're going to see me type live on the internet, which is never going to end well. I already can tell I am just butchering this. Normally I'm a pretty good typer. I'm going to try to go through Strike King and find their Shadlicious swim bait. I couldn't spell it live, so I'm just going to scroll through and find it. Oh, here we go. Here's one of the trailers I like to use. First, I like to use the Strike King Swimming Caffeine Shad, and I'll use it in the 4-inch version, and I'll throw it in the pearl color, and that's what I'll put on the outside wire when I'm fishing for bigger bass and when they're more aggressive. And then on the main wire, that center wire, I'll throw a 4.8-inch Strike King Shadlicious swim bait, and I'm going to have to, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it. I don't want to scroll through Tackle Warehouse with you guys all day, but here we go. and I'll throw either a 4.5 inch or a 5.5 inch Shadlicious swim bait, and I'll either throw it in an IU color or this blue gizzard shad. So I really like doing that. Seems to get some really good bites for me on the Alabama rig, and I've always seemed to have the most luck when I fish this paddle tail swim bait on the center wire. I don't seem to catch that many fish when I throw all paddle tail swim baits. For some reason, it just maybe doesn't attract the fish as well. I don't know why. Maybe it's just that it's my superstition, but I always seem to have the most luck when I fish those just normal paddle tail or like the Strike King swimming caffeine shads or like a Zoom swimming fluke on the outside wires, and then I'll throw this paddle tail hollow body swim bait on the center wire. So that's a really good call out there. And then as far as what Alabama rigs I like to fish, there's two I actually fish. The first is the Zoom or the Yum Flash Mob Junior, and the main reason I fish that is because it's the cheapest umbrella rig you can buy, and it's only $12. So, and you also find them at like Walmart, so I really like that. But Flash Mob Junior, it's a little bit more compact, and that's the umbrella rig I like to throw when I'm throwing that Kaitak Fat Impact, those little bit more subtle swim baits. And then if I'm fishing a bigger Alabama rig with those bigger baits, I'm going to be throwing a Strike King titanium umbrella rig. And this is the one that has a titanium wires, and they like flex, which is really cool. And I think it gives the bait a little bit extra action. But this rig is pretty big and bulky, and definitely not a finesse rig. And so when I'm again fishing for aggressive bass, I'll throw this one, and when I'm trying to target fish that are a little more pressured or I want a more subtle rig, I'll throw the Flash Mob Junior. Another bait I really like to throw this time of year, especially in the Ozarks on lakes like Beaver Lake, like we just looked at, is a wigglewort. And this is a classic bait on the Ozarks lakes. And if anyone fishes in the Ozarks, you've heard about that wigglewort bite. And wigglewort dives, like I said, 7 to 12 feet. And normally I'll throw that on 10-pound test with like a medium light action bait casting rod. And I'll just crank it down 45-degree banks that have chunk rock on them. And basically the colors I like to throw in this bait, there's three I throw. The first is this Creek Craw color, and I really like it because it has that like white belly, which kind of looks like a shad just a little bit, but it also has that green on the back. And so I think they can kind of double purpose as a shad imitating bait and a craw imitating bait. And then my number one go-to color in that wigglewort is a natural red crayfish color. And this is a really good color when the fish are around grass or when the water's a little more stained. So if the water has 2 feet visibility or less, I'm throwing this natural red crayfish color. And then if the water's a little bit clearer, like more than 2 feet visibility, I'm throwing this phantom brown craw color. And it's a little more translucent, and when you're fishing in areas with cleaner water, those fish like that more translucent bait because it's a little bit harder for them to see in that clear water, and it just seems to get me more bites when I fish that color. So that's a really good bait you guys should check out, especially if you're not fishing the Ozark lakes. Let's say you're fishing in South Carolina or you're fishing in Tennessee, places like that. I would definitely check out that wigglewort because it's a bait that isn't super popular around the rest of the country, at least from what I've heard. I might be wrong about that, but it's super popular here in the Ozarks, and it almost gets overfished. Last couple baits I want to talk about. One is a Lucky Craft pointer. This is a killer bait in the pre-spawn, especially when the water temperatures get in the 50 to 55 degree range. This bait, the Pointer 100 specifically, is a great bait when those fish are just starting to move up onto that pre-spawn locations and all the way through March and into April, right when they get up on the beds. And I throw this Pointer 100 in two colors. I'll throw it in a Chartreuse shad, and I'll throw it in a let's see here. It's called the Ghost Minnow. So I throw it in Ghost Minnow and Chartreuse shad. And if you notice anything, guys, I'm pretty basic when it comes to my lure color selection. I'm actually colorblind, so I can't see colors really at all. I can see a little bit of color, but not much. And so I've never really been bothered by the color of my fishing lures. So like in my jig box, if you look at my jig box, I have 2 color jigs, black and blue and green pumpkin. I fish green pumpkin when the water is clear, and I fish black and blue when the water is dirty. That's it. And it's worked great for me ever since I've been fishing. Like I said, I've fished 150 tournaments. I've done really well, national tournaments, won state championships and stuff. And I keep it simple with 2 colors. Again, jerk baits, I fish 2 colors. The chartreuse shad when the water clarity is less than 2 feet of visibility. When the water visibility is more than 2 feet, I fish this ghost minnow because it's a little more translucent, and that's it. That's all the colors I throw. And one, it saves me a lot of money because I don't have to buy a bunch of different colored fishing lures. And also, in my opinion, I think that with fishing lures, it doesn't matter too much about the color. It's I don't know, it's more about the area you put the lure in. If you're around fish and you're around active fish, it doesn't matter if you're throwing a chartreuse blueback or a chartreuse greenback crankbait. And a lot of times I don't even think it matters if you're throwing a sexy shad crankbait versus a chartreuse blueback crankbait. They're going to bite the lure if you throw it in there. There's certain times though when, if you're like fishing a school of fish on like the Tennessee River, where changing the color can cause the fish to react, but again, it doesn't really matter which color you change to. You can switch from a chartreuse blueback to a red crankbait and it'll refire the school. So it doesn't matter exactly what color you're fishing, it's just changing the color up that makes the difference. And so, I mean, if you look at my tackle box, it's super simple. I carry no more than 3 colors in any fishing lure I throw. And that's just my personal approach. And again, I focus on the area and less about the lure. And I think that saved me a lot of money over the years, a lot of wasted time worrying about the color and stuff like that. And if anything, I'll switch what type of lure I'm fishing instead of changing the color. And so that might not be a popular approach with people in the stream. Let me know in the stream, guys, what you think about that. Is that something you guys like? Are you really big on what color the fishing lure is? Do you think it makes a difference? If you think I'm wrong, let me know. I'd love to hear your opinion because I might be missing something big. That's just something that I've found over the years. Last thing I want to talk about here, guys, is terminal tackle in the springtime. Basically, I just went through, one thing I have to go through is jigs. But I basically went through all the baits I fish in the springtime, just covering those 4 baits right there. I'll fish some other stuff. I'll fish some Carolina rigs. I'll fish a bladed swim jig like the Strike King Pure Poison or like a chatterbait. I'll fish that as well. Really, the only other thing I fish is jigs. And when it comes to jigs, I fish a bunch of different types, but one of my favorite is a finesse jig, and the one I like is a Jewel heavy cover finesse football jig. I really like this jig. It comes in a 2-pack. They're cheap. And again, I'll fish them in a 3/8 ounce and a 1/2 ounce size in black and blue and in green pumpkin. And that's it. And there's a bunch of different green pumpkins. I think I throw this green pumpkin, or I just pick a green pumpkin out of the package. I can't tell which green pumpkin is which, to be 100% honest. It all looks the same to me. But that's my finesse jig I like to throw. As far as football jigs, when I'm fishing a little bit bigger football jig, I'll throw a Strike King, either 3/4 ounce or 1/2 ounce tour grade football jig, this one right here, and I'll fish it again, green pumpkin and black and blue, and that's it. And this green pumpkin craw color in 1/2 ounce and 3/4 ounce. And then the last jig I fish is actually a Strike King tour grade skipping jig, and that's a jig that is meant for skipping underneath boat docks. And I don't know if I can find that here. I don't think there's like a category for skipping jigs, but it has like a bait keeper on it. It's a really cool jig, that skipping jig, and so I like that. And again, green pumpkin, black and blue. That's it. So I can't find it here real quick, but you guys can look it up. Strike King tour grade skipping jig. Bruce with the donation. Thank you so much, Bruce Clayton. For the donation, really appreciate that. Let's see what you guys are saying over here. Not a lot of comments. Hopefully we're getting some more activity going, guys. Love to see the comments. Love to hear what you guys have to say. But Colton says, that's exactly how I am, so I'm glad there's another guy. Gabe says, let's see here. He's saying ×2. Bass Newbie saying we got a lot of rain in northwest Arkansas. Tips for fishing in muddy water. That's a really good question. I'll cover that here just really quick. Actually, I'll cover that in the Q&A section if you guys can hold on that a little bit. That's actually going to be a really good thing to talk about in the Q&A, is how to deal with these muddy rising lakes. So I'll do that. And thanks, guys, too, for all the stuff in here. Daniel Sparling, one of my buddies, says, awesome stuff, man. Appreciate that. Q&A, I'll be fishing Hamilton tomorrow. So maybe take a look at Lake Hamilton. I can do that for you, Gabe, for sure, because I do like Lake Hamilton. And then, can you do any northern smallmouth fisheries? Getting fished. I definitely will, especially when the lakes start to thaw out up there, like in April. I'm going to do a lot of northern lakes. So I'm going to start switching to that once it gets a little bit warmer up north. So I'll definitely be looking at that. And let's see here. Bunch of other stuff. So hopefully everyone, I'm getting everyone's comments and hearing everyone out. So we're right on schedule. So I'm glad I'm able to stick to schedule. This is the first time I've ever done like a schedule for the stream, and it's working pretty well. And there's 85 people still watching an hour in, so hopefully you're enjoying it. It's not boring. That you like what I'm saying. Leave a comments in the stream if you're enjoying what I'm saying, or in the comments on the video. This video goes live on YouTube right after I'm done with it, so let me know what you think about this style of video. If there's anything else you want me to talk about, if you want me to slow down, speed up, whatever. I just want to make this stream as useful as for you guys as I can, and I want to keep doing them because they're super fun, and I love engaging with you guys on the stream. It's really fun. So let's switch back over to Navionics now and cover our last lake, which is Timms Ford Lake in Tennessee. Okay, so we're over here, so let's head to Timms Ford Lake. So Timms Ford Lake, last lake we're looking at today, and it looks like an awesome fishery. This is actually a smallmouth fishery, so kind of let's see here. Who's asking about the smallmouth fisheries? Getting fish. He's asking about northern smallmouth fisheries. So this isn't a northern smallmouth fishery. This is a little bit shallow, or a little bit more southern smallmouth fishery. But hopefully, maybe actually, I don't think a lot of the stuff will apply. It might, but a lot of guys who fish these smallmouth fisheries in the south are probably going to get some good stuff out of this. And it looks like Ricky Meeker says, I'll be fishing Timms Ford this weekend, and we've had a lot of rain. What would be the best baits to use? So let's talk about this lake, Timms Ford, in context of having a lot of rain, which is kind of what I planned for today. So one thing about Timms Ford Lake that you can notice right away is that it's a pretty narrow kind of I guess, deep lake. So it has these nice little narrow fingers that run throughout it, and it's pretty deep. And if you look right here, here's the dam area of the lake. The water's a lot clearer. And then as you move up here, you get a little bit dirtier water. And so what I would expect if you're going to get a fishery that gets a lot of rain is that, as you can tell here, this water right here is a little bit dirtier, and then the water is clear. It's a darker color. That's how you know it's clear. And this is more brown. That's why you know it's dirtier. And so if you get a big influx of rain, it's going to make this whole creek all the way probably out to here really dirty, all the way out. And on a smallmouth fishery like this, the fish, when the lake gets really dirty, they don't really want to get in that super dirty water. What they probably are going to do is get on the area where that clean water and that dirty water mixes. And so I'm going to show you guys some areas here on Timms Ford where that dirty water and clear water were mixing in this photo. And then I'll also show you some areas out here on the clear part of the lake, just in case that muddy water creeps a little bit further out into the main lake. And so hopefully I'll give you some ideas on what I would do on this fishery. So first up, let's take a look at spot 1 that I marked here. So if we zoom into spot 1, this is the type of stuff I'd be fishing all day long on Timms Ford. And it's these areas where you see, if you look right here, I'm going to zoom in really close. As you can look at this point, here's an area where there's just pebbles and really loose rock, and there's pretty much no chunk rock down this part of the bank. And then if we move around this point, there's some really chunky, thick rock, and then it kind of disappears as you move further back in this creek. It kind of gets a little bit more sparse. And this little point right here is going to be dynamite for these fish in the pre-spawn. Basically what they're going to do is they're going to pull up out of this deep water. Here's the main creek channel, or the main, creek channel is right out here. They're going to pull up out of this creek channel and get on these shallow points. And the number one bait I would fish, guys who are fishing out on Timms Ford this weekend, is a storm wigglewort in that red crayfish color that I just showed. I would be throwing that all day long. Literally wouldn't put it down, because there's two things about that wigglewort that are so good. The first is that it has a pretty wide wobble and puts a lot of water, it moves a lot of water in that dirtier water, and also it dives 7 to 10 feet deep. And so those fish that are in the pre-spawn don't want to get up super shallow. Probably they still want to sit in that maybe 10 to, or maybe that 7 to 10 foot range, and so it's going to get down there in those rocks perfect. And again, I would try to maybe just start my boat kind of sitting out here off these points, and I would be casting right down this bank on this transition from this no rock area to this more rockier area, and fish down these points and back in these pockets up in that 7 to 10 foot range. And on Lake 10 Killer, which I talked about at the beginning of the stream, that has smallmouth in it, I catch a ton of fish in March on a storm wigglewort, cranking these type areas, these main lake points, these main creek points that have a little bit extra rock on them. And that wigglewort bite is on fire right now on 10 Killer, or at least it had been, and before this rain. And so that's the type of bank I'd be fishing for the majority of the day. I'd also be, cranking down these little laydowns and stuff as well, guys. That's some good looking stuff. Thanks to Terminator Fishing for the 1999 donation. Really appreciate that. So thanks for the donations always, guys. I really appreciate all that. It really helps me, make this content and helps me put out more content. Again, I'm, spend a lot of time doing these videos, and potentially one day if I can keep, making these videos and gaining subscribers like I am, there's a chance I could do this full time, which would be amazing. That's a long way down the road, though. I probably need to get up to 100,000 subscribers before I can do that. And that might not happen for a long time, but I've been growing the channel really well. I'm going up like 100 subscribers some days, anywhere from 50 to 100 subscribers a day, and just getting a lot of good response from you guys on the videos. So if you guys want me to make more videos, share these videos out with your friends, let people know about the channel, and it's going to help me grow the channel and help me make more content in the future. So enough about all that sappy stuff and business stuff. Let's keep talking about fishing, which is what I know best. So another spot I really like out here on Tim's Ford is this point right here. The reason I like it actually is because, again, it's kind of leading into a mouth of one of these spawning pockets, and you have the main channel right here, and then you have a spawning pocket, and this point sticks out into this creek. And I've had a lot of luck on Greer's Ferry Lake in Arkansas and 10 Killer Ferry Lake in Oklahoma, which are both smallmouth fisheries, fishing points just like this. And I'll drag a football jig off the end of these points and a Carolina rig out in 20 to 25 feet of water. And so if you guys are going out this weekend and that shallow water crankbait bite isn't happening, I would sit out a little bit deeper and maybe throw a single swim bait or a football jig off the end of these points in 20 to 25 feet of water, even down to 40 feet of water, especially if the water is still clear in this creek. And that's going to be a really good point to fish. And also, I'd crank this point as well, because if any fish were sitting out here, when the water rises and you get heavy rain, normally that pushes the fish shallower, and they're going to move up with the rising water. And so I would move up onto this point and fish this with a crankbait as well. So that's a good looking spot. Another good looking area was back in this creek. I'll kind of move out so you can see back in this creek. And again, there's a nice little rocky area where it goes from no rock right here to a really rocky bank, and there's some nice boat docks off the end of this area too. And so boat docks are really good on these deep clear lakes. You can throw a jerkbait down the sides of them, fish like a Ned rig out in front of them, or again just drag a jig out off the end of these banks. One really good technique is if that crankbait bite's not working and the water still has 2 to 5 feet of visibility, I would actually take a half-ounce football jig, cast it out right up to the shore, and drag it all the way out. Put the boat in like 50 to 60 feet of water and drag it all the way back out to the boat, and try to fish that bait down from maybe 3 to 4 feet of water all the way down to 30 feet of water. And that's a really good technique I use all the time on 10 Killer and catch some big bass doing that. So those are just some areas I would fish up this creek. But like we were saying, there's a chance this whole creek just got completely wiped out from rain. And so what I would do is also kind of have some backup areas further down the lake in this cleaner water. And there's a couple I marked here just to give you some ideas on what I would fish. The first is this little point right here. And the reason I like it a lot is it has that same exact setup to those other points. Again, we have areas where there's no rock right here, and then this nice chunky rock, a transition from no rock to chunk rock right here. And I would crank this bank all day long, especially if there's a little bit of stain in the water. Let's say that water muddied up all the way out to this part of the creek, and there's a little bit of stain in that water. I'd be cranking that. Even if there's not, I would probably be fishing a jig down this bank, maybe fishing a little biffle bug with like a Strike King Menace grub on it, and like kind of casting out and just reeling it in nice and slow on the bottom. It's a really good technique out on 10 Killer, which is again the smallmouth lake. Another good looking point right here, I would be fishing that again with a jig, with a crankbait off this main lake point up shallow and off the end a little bit deeper. A couple more spots that I was looking at. We're off this main lake. Here's another really good looking point. This point's great because it's right in the mouth of a couple spawning pockets. And if you look here, you kind of see a theme of the spots I picked out, but no rock to big chunk rock again. So good looking spot. And if you're getting to these pockets and they're a little bit stained, I wouldn't be afraid to move a little bit further back in here, and like this point looks really good right here, and I would just maybe crank this point, throw a Carolina rig off the end of this point. Good looking spot. A couple other spots that I looked at were kind of further up this creek, but there's a chance that they kind of got rained out. Most likely they got rained out from all that flooding, so I'm not going to talk about them too much. Instead, I'm going to switch over to Navionics and show you a couple spots down in the clear section of this lake that probably are going to be less affected by the rain, and where you might be able to find some smallmouth that weren't messed up by the rain and they're kind of still in their same winter pre-spawn patterns. So let's switch over to Navionics. I'm going to try to get some comments here too. There's a bunch of people going in here. Gabe says throw the rock crawler. Those are money. It's true. Pretty much the same thing as that wigglewort. And I've heard really good things about that bait, so I'd throw that. Northeast Bassin says you're awesome, man. One of the best I've ever seen. You're so detailed. Appreciate that. And Robert's asking if I'm red-green colorblind. I am, and pretty severe. I can't see purple. I can't see pink. I can't really tell the difference between, obviously, red and green at all. So a little bit difficult, but most of the time I just go off the names of the color or the names of the baits and the colors on the packaging, and that always seems to work well. But see here. Thanks for all the comments in here, by the way, Gabe, and everyone who's, just commenting and talking in the stream. It's awesome. Love to see the conversation going on. Let's see here. God's Dozer said, gave you and your channel a shout out on BBC, Bass Boat Central, and Texas Fishing Forums this week. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much, guys, for shout outs on any forums, anything you guys can do. I really appreciate that, and it again helps grow the channel. So thanks again. Still 70 people watching, an hour and 20 minutes in, which is awesome. I mean, that's like doubling my maximum, and that's sustaining the entire stream. So that's so cool. And I mean, my subscribers have gone up like crazy. Like they're, I'm going up. I'm like doubling my subscribers every month at this point, and so it's awesome to see that, and it's really making it all worth it. I've been making these videos for a year, and I was worried, like, man, do people really want this content? Is this stuff that people really want? Am I getting too detailed? But I'm glad that you guys are enjoying it, and glad there's a lot of fishing nerds like me out there that love talking about lake maps and seasonal patterns, all that kind of stuff. It's stuff I love to talk about. Google user says you do such a good job and really help us newbies. Appreciate that. There's actually a video series I'm planning on making, hopefully starting in the summer. I'm actually going to be finishing my MBA, and I'm going to be starting a full-time job here in May or June, something like that. And my plan is to make a bass fishing tournament breakdown video once a week, do a live stream once a week, and then do either a fishing video or a bass fishing basics type video where I'm going to talk about either how to read electronics, how to look at topographic maps, what fishing rods are best to use, how to cast, all these different types of videos. So if you guys have topics that you want to learn about, like bass fishing basics kind of stuff, like what are points, what are creek channels, I have a video on that, but stuff like that, or like how to learn how to skip cast, I have a video on that, or how to cast further, how to cast a bait caster, all that stuff. I love making teaching videos. They're always really fun. And so if there's stuff like that that you really want to learn and that you can't find good instruction on YouTube, leave it comment in one of my other videos or in this video after it gets posted, this live stream comments just kind of disappear after I make after the stream's over. So make sure you just leave a comment with any suggestions or video ideas, and I'll be sure to take a look at that. But anyways, people are saying loving the detail. Rob says more detail the better, which is awesome. Colton says, what tournament trails do you fish in Arkansas? I graduated from high school, and I'm looking to get in on some new tournament trails. One I really like to fish is Mr. Bass of Arkansas. Got some really good stuff. There's also the Bassmaster Weekend Series, I think, is still happening, and the Federation is always, Bass Federation is always really good. You can qualify for the Classic through the Federation, which is awesome. Anyways, got off on a little bit of a tangent there. Let's get back to the lake. So, like I was saying, I want to look at some spots on Navionics now on the clearer part of Tim's Ford Lake to kind of give you an idea of spots that might not be as affected by the high water and the rain. So, let's see here. A couple spots I liked right away were first this main little point, and the reason I like it is because if you look, it's the furthest away from any of these creeks on the lake, basically the furthest possible point other than like this area in here. So this part right here and this part right here are the furthest away from areas where water is going to be pouring in the lake. That means this water is going to stay the clearest and it's going to be the least affected by any rain. And the reason I like this area specifically is it has some really nice offshore structure for smallmouth to get on. And a couple spots I really like. First up are like this little point right here. If you look at this point right here, it looks great. There's a creek channel that runs right off the tip of this point. It's 115 feet deep, and there's a nice shallow flat spot up on top of this point. And if you look, there's an area with no contour lines. And whenever you find an area with no contour lines, that normally means that there's a hard spot or a clean spot on the bottom. And there's normally going to be rock down there, or like normally it'll indicate like some sort of high spot or an area where you have like a rock pile or something, and so that looks like a great spot. Another spot similar is like right in here, and don't be afraid on these smallmouth lakes to fish 40, 50, 60 feet deep even, especially in the south. Those smallmouth will get out there, and sometimes they'll suspend over that deep water, and you can catch them on like a single swim bait suspended, but they'll also just sit down in 30, 40, 50 feet of water, and you can catch them on like a 1 ounce or a 3/4 ounce football jig. Another spot I really like off this area is actually this nice little channel swing bank right here. If you look, those contour lines are super close together, and there's a nice little hole here. And this little channel swing bank looks great for like a jerkbait or a football jig. And these docks right here actually look pretty good too. You could probably throw a shaky head on those docks and these docks as well. You know, skipping these boat docks, especially as the water comes up. Smallmouth will get around boat docks, and you can catch them skipping boat docks as well. So that's a really good looking spot. Again, here's a nice little hump. There's like a hump right here and a hump right here. Humps are always good on these deep, clear smallmouth fisheries in the south. So I would check those out and just kind of graph over them and look for arches on the bottom or kind of around the area. If you see any arches on the bottom or any big boulders on the bottom, I'd be throwing a football jig down there and dragging it down there, and you're going to get on some fish. Another area that I liked was this area in here. Again, it's really far away from any creeks. Really, the only creeks they're going to be feeding in are these creeks right here. And so if we look right here, there's not going to be much water that's flowing in from any creeks. There's no creeks really. I mean, there's a few small ones, but nothing major, no major creeks. And so this little area right here is going to be dynamite, in my opinion, at least. What I would do is I would look, these contour lines look kind of funky, but what I would do is I would kind of fish off the end of these points. I would crank this area with that wiggle wart again up shallow. I would look off the end of this island right here, this little point that sticks out. That looks like a great area to fish. All these points right here. Just fish every single point off the end of the point. Fish, again, put the boat in 40, 50, 60 feet of water and cast a football jig up to the bank and drag it off the bank into 30 or 40 foot. That's a proven tactic on any southern smallmouth fishery, and it's one I've used on 10 Killer and Goose Ferry all the time and catch tons of fish. So, looks like there's some stuff here. I don't know if there's a... Someone's saying that it's up 26 feet. I don't know which lake they're talking about. Hopefully that's not Tim's Ford, because otherwise that's going to be crazy if it's up 26 feet. I think that might be DeGray they're talking about. That's Gabe. But hopefully that gave you guys who fish Tim's Ford an idea of the stuff I would fish on this lake. And so to end it out, I'm going to take some Q&A. So if you guys want to start sending in questions, just shoot as many questions as you want at me, and I'm going to kind of scroll through the chat again and try to answer some that I missed. And so just keep posting questions for the next 30 minutes. I'll be on for 30 minutes talking. So let's see here. Let's just go through and see what people are talking about. Someone asked about Lake Nimrod, and I've heard that Nimrod is great. Gary Miller asked that. I've heard that Great Lake is amazing. I've also heard that the fish don't get deeper than 2 feet of water. And so when the water temperatures get up to like 50 degrees in Arkansas here, which is, they should be getting close to that, but like 50, 55 degrees, I heard that lake just turns on. And you can catch them fishing a spinnerbait and a jig up shallow. And I said, they say never get deeper than 2 feet of water on that lake. And so if it's like kind of a central Arkansas lake, and so we've got a ton of rain recently. And so what I would do if I fished out there is get as far back up into that flooded timber and get really far back into any flooded areas and kind of work my way back in there fishing a spinnerbait with a single Colorado blade around those like flooded trees, or I'd be flipping like a tube and a jig up there shallow. And that's what I would try in Nimrod. Never been out there, but I'm planning on getting out there soon. Let's see here. Let's see here. Terminator says he helps me and I bass fish for 35 years. You can never know enough. Best YouTube fishing channel ever. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that, guys. Appreciate all the kind words and all the support. I really do appreciate it. It's, I love doing this. That's why I do it. I'm not doing it for fame or glory. I just, I guess I can kind of explain why I made the channel. I've never really talked about it too much, but I basically taught myself to fish from when I was 7 years old onwards. I really had no one in my family who fished, other than I had an uncle who would just take me fishing, but not no one who like tournament fished or bass fished. And so I just fell in love with the sport of bass fishing and taught myself by reading articles, reading magazines, watching fishing channels, Larry Nixon, fishing channels, Bill Dance Outdoors, stuff like that. And as I got older and got my own boat when I was like 16 and all that stuff, basically I kind of hit a brick wall where I couldn't get any more information just by watching YouTube videos or reading magazines, because no one showed exactly where they were fishing. They didn't show like a lake image of like the topographic map of the area they're fishing, or show the exact area they're fishing on Google Earth. And most of the time I feel like that's because people don't want to give up their secret honey holes. But it was frustrating for me because I was like, how am I supposed to learn how to catch fish unless I go out and fish by myself and go try it myself, and through trial and error. And basically that's what I did. I fished tons of tournaments. I would try to get out on the water as much as I could, and just through trial and error I figured out how to find fish, what types of structure they get on, how to read a topographic map and find fish using topographic maps, using Google Earth, using electronics. And after I got all this knowledge, I realized that I had the knowledge now that I was looking for when I was 16, and it would be awesome if I could share that knowledge back with people who are learning how to bass fish and who are new to fishing. And so that's kind of the goal with this channel, is to go back and say, okay, I spent 6 years of my life learning how to do all this stuff. How about I share it back in a way that's easy for people to understand, and hopefully they can take the information and learn what I did in 6 years and learn it in 3 years, or in 2 years, or 6 months, or a month, whatever it would be. And so that's kind of my goal, and hopefully that will work out and you guys can learn stuff from what I'm doing. And obviously I don't know everything about bass fishing, and I learn something new every single time. And that's why I like doing these lake breakdowns for these tournaments, because I learn every time I do these breakdowns more about how to find fish, what patterns work, what areas work. So all kinds of good stuff. So anyways, that's enough on that. Let's get back to some Q&A. So see here. There's one guy's asking about Arkansas stuff. Gabe said Mr. Bass is a good place to look for tournaments, and definitely Colton, that's where I would look first. Mr. Bass of Arkansas is great. Let's see here. Gary says, it's funny because I have them tied already. You're going to check it out after school. I'm trying to keep all track of everything that's going on here. I'm losing the story on a couple people here, but hopefully people are getting everything answered. Gabe says that you'll be in the woods 26 feet high. I don't know if that's Hamilton or DeGray, one of those two. But one thing that we could talk about, I guess, is we can go over to Lake Hamilton. We could take a look at what I would do if I fished there tomorrow if the lake got really high. So let's just do that and just see. That'd be something interesting to do for the Q&A. Let's go over to Lake Hamilton. I'll just look it up real quick. You guys have seen my videos on Lake Hamilton, I'm assuming, if you've watched the channel. There's a lot of videos out there that I did this last winter on Hamilton, and this lake is so good. It has like, you know, tons of 20-pound bags that are caught each year, and for some reason, I just am terrible in Hamilton. Like, I can catch a 15-pound bag, a 10, 15-pound bag, but I can't catch that 20-pound bags. I don't know what the deal is, but if I was fishing Hamilton tomorrow and it was, I don't know, if it's actually that high, what I would do, I guess we can look at the gray too, but if I was on Hamilton and the lake was super high, I would be going up into these areas where you have these boat docks. And Lake Hamilton was down like, I think, 7 or 8 feet, so hopefully it's just back up to normal pool. But what I would do is I would fish areas like Hot Springs Creek here, and imagine that the lake comes up and now there's like water up in these people's yards. Let's imagine. I don't know if it's true, but let's say that there's water all the way up in these people's yards. What I would do first is I would actually try to fish down these cement retaining walls. If you can imagine, this is the old bank line where this retaining wall is. And so if the water's up here, like let's say it's flooding these people's houses, I would start by trying to fish the old bank line. And so on like Hamilton's case, like let's say there's some nice like riprap or something right here. I would try to fish this like sidewalk or this riprap bank, and even if the water is up here in these houses, a lot of fish aren't going to move all the way back up into that shallow water. They're actually going to stay on that old bank line, and I would fish it with a crankbait, with a jig, things like that, and just work it kind of slow and work the old bank line. Then, if that doesn't work and the old bank line isn't productive, next thing I would look for are these islands and these little humps and islands. And the reason I like these type of areas is because unlike an area like, let's say this point right here, let's say this all got flooded and this whole forest of trees got flooded. The problem with fishing this type of area is the fish could be anywhere up in these trees. Let's say the water floods all the way up through here. These fish could be anywhere in these trees, and they can be really hard to find, and there's so much water for them to spread out in. But when you fish a nice little island like this, even if this thing is flooded all the way up and all these trees are in like 3 or 4 feet of water, there's a limited amount of water they can get in. And so whenever I get a lake that's super flooded, the first place I check is the old bank line. The second place I check are these islands, or these little peninsulas that stick out, and I'll get up around these little islands and flip, you know, a jig up in the trees. I would fish a spinnerbait in the trees, things like that, up super shallow. Let's go over to DeGray, actually, because there have been times when DeGray has got super flooded. And here's Lake DeGray. And again, they say it's like 26 feet high. And one thing I did a few years ago, actually, on Lake DeGray, is I fished over here by the state park. And if you look here, there's actually a road that runs in on the state park here, and I actually, one time when the lake got really flooded, I was catching them like off the road. Like there's literally these metal railings that go across the road, and the lake was so high that you could catch them off this, you know, right off the metal railings. And they weren't completely underwater, but they were close, and you could catch them off the metal railings down these riprap banks. These are always really good places to fish when the lakes are super flooded. And I would also catch them off of picnic tables. That was a pattern that I did on. I'm going around everywhere, guys. I hope this is not losing you too much, skipping lakes. But up on Gruce Ferry Lake, or Gruce Ferry Lake up here in Arkansas. This is that lake I was talking about that has smallmouth and largemouth. And there's an area in here called the Narrows. And one year it was hilarious. We were catching fish literally in this parking lot here, and you can see there's like picnic tables like right here. If we zoom in really close, I actually caught a 3-pound largemouth off this exact picnic table when the lake was flooded like 12 feet. And so I would drive my boat up over the top of all this stuff, and I was flipping picnic tables and street signs, and I basically looked at Google Earth and I was like, okay, well, where's all the stuff underwater? Like, here's this road, here's this riprap, let me go flip the edge of this road, or let me go in here. And I remember there was a grill that I didn't see underwater because it was too low, and I found it on Google Earth and on my phone, went over there, flipped, and caught like a 2-pounder flipping a grill. So crazy kind of stuff can happen when you fish on a lake that's super flooded, and so that's the kind of stuff that I would do. But porta potties are great cover in flooded water. That's what Dwayne says. Very true. You catch them pretty much on anything when the lakes get flooded. But another area that I caught them on really well on here on Groose Ferry when the lake got flooded is I went up this creek up here. And there's an island, and again, kind of like I was talking about earlier with this island, this whole island got flooded, and the fish were sitting on the edge of this island and kind of right in the saddle, and I was catching them flipping all this flooded buckbrush and these trees on this flooded island. So again, if you're fishing a really flooded lake, high muddy water, first thing I would do is find the old bank line and try to fish the old bank line. Second, I would try to find an island and try to fish up in the island, like up on top of the island with a spinner bait with a jig, flipping up shallow. And last but not least, if nothing else is working, go find some porta potties and some picnic tables and flip those. And between those 3 tactics, you're almost guaranteed to catch some fish. Anyways, the other thing that I would do too, if I'm fishing these flooded lakes, if you get a bunch of rain and it's actually a cold rain, one thing I would do is I would actually try to stay away from any area where you're getting a lot of inflow of water. So like, as you can see here, this is a big creek and the water's running in and it'll flood in this area. And so if you have a really cold rain and it's actually lowering the water temperature, the worst thing you can fish is cold, muddy, rising water. Water that's rising, that's muddy, and it's cold. And so in that case, when you get those types of situations, I try to stay on areas of the lake where there's no creeks feeding it in. And in the case of like Groose Ferry, Cove Creek is a great area for that. Basically, there's no creeks really other than over here. They're feeding this lake, and so even if the water rises, it's not going to be as cold and as muddy as other parts of the lake, and this is a pretty clear area of the lake anyways. And so I'll just try to focus on this clearer portion of the lake that has no creeks feeding it. So those are my tips for that. But that's that. Let's see here. Google user asks, are there any tips for Lake Chickamauga? Google user actually did a live stream on Lake Chickamauga. I think it was like my first or second, maybe my second live stream. If you go back in my videos, my second live stream, I did a breakdown of Lake Chickamauga, and so you can check that out. And I covered that pretty thoroughly from pre-spawn, winter all the way through pre-spawn. So I checked that out. Michael Eden says, I love this channel, but I hope my competitors don't find it. Just kidding, Johnny. I'm spreading the word with everyone I know. Appreciate that, guys. I'm kind of worried about you guys holding out on me and not sharing this around, kind of keeping the knowledge for yourself. But hopefully that's not the case, and hopefully you're sharing it out. But I can understand if you are. I mean, I might do that myself too. But Buddy Mayer says, thanks for the videos, much appreciated, no problem. James says Hamilton is not high, they're keeping it down, which is good. It's a bit higher than you're showing now, so sorry I missed that earlier, James, but hopefully it's still applied. And Gabe Williams says degree is 13 feet high, so that's definitely in picnic table range. Picnic table and porta potty danger zone there, so definitely check that out. Let's see here. Question. Quick down and dirty version of rod choice for jigs, crankbaits, jerkbaits, shaky head. Okay, let's do that. So Keith, I don't know if I could give a rod suggestion for all those, but let's just say you have 2 rods for those 2 purposes. So let me pull back over Tackle Warehouse. I'll say that we're just going to use 2 rods for all those applications. So what I would do for that, if I could only have 2 fishing poles to fish a shaky head, a jig, a jerkbait, and a crankbait. First, I would use both bait casting rods. And the first rod I would throw, let's just go with a 13 Fishing. I don't know too much about rod brands, to be honest, guys. But let's just go to like let's go to Omen. I've used these Omens before. These are pretty nice. They're pretty cheap, but I've used them before and they're not too bad. Or no, these aren't the Omens. These are, I don't know what that is. Those are cheaper. But Omens, here we go. $100, not too bad. So what I would do is I would come in here and I would look for a medium light. There's no medium light. Okay, well, I'm gonna mess this all up. Okay, let me go to a rod that I fish. Sorry guys, this is a cluster right now. This is not planned and it's all going all over the place. But let's go to Quantum, because that's the rods I use. No particular reason. I just have always used Quantum rods. That's what I've used for years. And the one that I'm going to look at is the Smoke series, Quantum Smoke. And for a crankbait and a jerkbait, they have one. Why do they have one smoke rod? What's going on? Here we go. Smoke has 3. There we go. So what I would do is I would fish a 7-foot medium light action bait casting rod, and that would be the rod I throw for a jerkbait and a crankbait. And this is the rod. This is the exact rod I throw for my crankbait and my jerkbait. Pretty much, not the exact one. All my rods are like 10 years old, but this is the same. Quantum makes pretty much the same action, same type of rod. They just put micro guides or don't put micro guides on. That's pretty much the only difference. And these new Smoke Series 3 don't have micro guides. They have normal guides, which is awesome. I love these new rods. I have a couple of them. Every time I break a rod, they have like a lifetime warranty, and I send them back, and I can get another rod. And I'll get these smokes, and so that's why I have them. But these are pretty nice rods, and so I throw a 7-foot medium light for your crankbait and your jerkbait, and then for your jig and your shaky head, I would throw a 7'2" medium heavy action rod. And I actually have this rod, and I actually plan on giving away one of these rods once I hit 5,000 subscribers. I'm doing a giveaway where I'm going to be giving away 5 packages of fishing lures worth $50, and I'm also going to be giving away a 7'2" medium heavy action Smoke Series 3 rod. I got an extra one in from Quantum on accident, and I asked them if they want me to send it back. They said no, and so I'm going to give it away to you guys when I get 5,000 subs. So share this video around, and basically I'm going to be taking people who are commenting on my videos. I'm going to throw them all into a random generator, and I'm going to be picking out people who are going to be winning these rods. So Alejandro, thank you so much for the $20 donation. I really appreciate that. Again, I appreciate all of the donations that you guys are giving. Really helps out with everything I'm doing, and helps me pay the bills and helps me put gas in the boat as a college student. So do appreciate that. And then for reels, again, I'm just gonna stick with Quantum because that's what I know. I'm not trying to be brand. Well, this isn't like brand sponsored. I'm not sponsored by anything. This is just the stuff that I use, and so that's why I'm suggesting it. But I've heard some really good stuff about this Quantum Vapor PT reel, and I would throw. I would get this in a 6:6:1 right-handed for the jig, and that I heard really good things about this reel, and I would use that for the jig. I like a 6:6:1 when I'm fishing jigs, when I'm flipping, when I'm fishing Carolina rig, anything like that. And then for the other crankbait and jerkbait rod, I would actually go for the Smoke reel, and I would get it in a oh gosh, maybe that's not the right one. I'll go to a 5:3:1 gear ratio reel. Maybe it's this one, Smoke Series 3. There we go. 5:1. I'll go for this 5:1 gear ratio reel. And the reason I like a 5:1 gear ratio reel for jerkbaits and crankbaits is because in the wintertime, you can crank that reel a little bit slower. It helps you slow down that crankbait, slow down that jerkbait. And also, if you want to then take that reel and use it on a different setup, let's say for deep cranking in the summertime, you could take that reel, put it on a 7'6" medium heavy action crankbait rod, and that 5:1 gear ratio reel has a lot more torque, and it'll help you reel in like a Strike King 6XD or a 10XD a lot easier. So always have a 5:1 gear ratio reel with you. That's what I would suggest. Let's see here. Oh man, there's tons of comments that are coming in. Let's see here. Can you do a bait review for the Live Target bait ball spinner rig? I actually can, because I'm very interested in those live target bait balls. I think that they're the biggest gimmick I've ever seen. I've also heard they break, but I don't know. That could be all. That's just why I read on Tackle Warehouse and stuff. But I'm very interested on them, so I might actually do that. I want to see what those are about. They could be really good. I don't know. Let's see here. I want to be out there Saturday. I'm not good enough to donate my money yet, James says. So that's the one thing about tournament fishing, guys, with going out and fishing a tournament, putting 80, 90 bucks into a pot, and then if you're not, on the fish, it kind of just sucks to give your money away. That's why I'm not doing a lot of tournaments right now. I want to do more tournaments, but I want to get to a point where I'm fishing a lake 3 or 4 times a month before I start tournament fishing again. For all my videos, I'm trying to give you guys looks at different types of bodies of water at different seasons, and so I never fish the same lake twice in a season, and that's how I've been doing it for the last year on my channel. And so I haven't been catching a ton of big fish like I normally would if I, let's say, fished Lake Dardanelle 4 or 5 times in a month. Normally I can get on a 20-pound bag consistently when I fish a lake that often, and kind of stay around the fish. But when I'm bouncing around lakes all the time, it's a little bit tougher. So once I get to a point where I can fish one lake consistently, I'm going to probably start tournament fishing again, so I'm not throwing away my money. Let's see here. Bex is saying, awesome, we'll check out the second live stream. Appreciate that. And Bex, thank you so much for the donation right now. It was good timing. I really appreciate that, and appreciate the support from everyone. So I also appreciate all the comments and everything tonight. Appreciate that. So I said appreciate so many times there. I'm so sorry. Let's see here. Fishing a tournament Saturday. Fish tips for fishing in muddy water. Bass and noob. Again, what I would do, kind of like what I was saying earlier, if the water's rising, I would fish those island areas, the old bank line. But if not, if the water's just muddy, what I would do is kind of go back to that Tim's Ford Lake. Look what I said there. But I would try to fish areas where the clean water and the dirty water mix. So where you have clean water, let's say it has 2 feet of visibility is clean water in your lake, and the other lake is chocolate milk, like you can't see anywhere. I would find where the chocolate milk and the 2-foot visibility water are mixing. That's normally where we're going to find the most active fish in my experience. And same thing goes if your clearest water on the lake is 10 feet deep, find it where it's mixing with the chocolate milk and where it's maybe 4 or 5 foot of visibility. That's where I would go. And then if that's not working, then just try to find the cleanest water you can fish, because those fish are going to be the least affected by all of that, rising muddy water. Let's see here. Karen Hick, good to see you in here. Appreciate the support as always. 100 says, I appreciate what you're doing. Have learned a bunch from watching your videos. Much respect from Iowa. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Alejandro. And I'm hoping to do more lake breakdowns and stuff of lakes in Iowa, Illinois. I know there's a lot of guys from that area that are watching my videos, and so I'm definitely going to be doing more breakdowns of those lakes once the lakes start to thaw out. JP fishing, where'd that one go? He said, I'm fishing Dardanelle Saturday, Sunday. You got any tips? I would fish the strip pits back in the Illinois Bayou. The water is going to be super muddy on the main river, and so I would get in the strip pits back in the back of Illinois Bayou, and there's like 5 or 6 of them, and I would just check those out, and I would fish an Alabama rig and a jerkbait and a jig in the strip pits, and I would be there all day. That's all I would do if I was fishing Dardanelle. And you can find the strip pits. I'll pull them up real quick here for you just to show you what they look like, just in case. Let's see how I do this. We're getting close on time, but I think we're good. Let me go out to Lake Dardanelle. Lake Dardanelle strip pits. So here's Illinois Bayou, and you can see here the lake's really muddy in this picture. What I would do is I would go back, and here's what the strip pits look like. They're back. This is the main Illinois Bayou, State Park Boat Ramp, Dardanelle Bay, Delaware Bay. I would go back in the bayou, and I would fish this strip pit right here. It gets the most pressure. This is like this is the last one I would fish. This is the Horseshoe Shiloh pit. This one's pretty good, but again, really pressured. This pit is really good. Again, you can just kind of idle back in here. I wouldn't run this. I wouldn't run anything past this bridge right now with that high muddy water. There's going to be debris and stuff floating through there. I wouldn't run any of this. I would idle. But you can get in this strip pit coming in through here. You can get into this strip pit, idling through here, fish this. You can see the water super clear even when this lake's really muddy, and it's really deep back in here too. And then there's also this kind of little backwater area. It's a little bit like kind of like a strip pit, but it's a little bit shallower. But with the water coming up, there might be some clean water back up in here, and you can sneak in here if the water's high. And so those are the areas I would fish if I was fishing on Saturday on Dardanelle or Sunday on Dardanelle. Let's see here. JP or JPip. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. JPip saying love my vapor reel. God, you guys are liking that reel. I want to get one so bad, but I also don't want to spend any money on fishing equipment. I have so much, but all my reels are like 10 years old, so I really want to get a new reel. I haven't got a new fishing reel, and literally my newest reel I own is probably 8 years old. So I would love to get a new fishing reel, but again, I got enough. It's all good. So Colton says I like the bait ball 10-foot diving crankbait. I might have to check that one out, as people are saying. Hank said, good job tonight, Johnny. Good information. Thank you, Hank. Appreciate that. B.M. Letley said, dude, love your channel. Appreciate that. Mario, good to see you on. Good stuff. Thanks for great info, Johnny. Thanks, Mario. Looked at his like a few streams ago as well. So that's pretty much it for what I had to talk about today. If you guys have any last minute questions, shoot them in here. If there's like a lake you want me to look at, like last second here in the last like 7 minutes, I could do a quick like zoom over there and take a look if you're like fishing the lake this weekend or whatever. This is your opportunity to get me to look at one of your lakes for about 6 minutes for nothing. So not that it's ever paid for. Lake Grapevine. Actually, I'm going to hold off on Grapevine, B, because I actually have a video on Grapevine. I think it's my first video ever, my live stream video I ever did. And so I actually broke that down, and maybe it was my first or my second. I broke Lake Grapevine down on one of them, so definitely go check that out. You should be able to get all the information. Let's see here. So the first one I got was Lake Marburg. Marburg Lake. This could. Oh, I'm getting tons now. Oh, what message retracted? I don't know what happened there, but I got Marburg. Hopefully this is the right lake. The message went away. Oh, it's small. Okay, Lake Margaret. Is this it? Is this the lake? It looks small, but this looks like the lake. Is this it, Northeast Bassin? This is in Pennsylvania, I think. Unless am I in Pennsylvania? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You need to be fishing the Potomac, man, too. That looks like it's great. So many requests coming in. Sorry, guys. That was a bad call to. I just picked the first one. Sorry about that. This looks like a good little lake. Not a lot going on from Google Earth that I can see. Looks like there's some nice bridges. I would definitely be checking out these bridges if I were you. Fishing an Alabama rig around these bridges and a jig, and a crankbait around all these little bridges. Definitely good spot, especially if there's rain up there. Current will be pushing around those bridges, and it'll be really good. And down the riprap. Let me see if they have a Navionics on it real quick, because that would be even better. Because it looks like there's not too much I can tell just from. Here we go. Oh yeah, here we go. Navionics. Let me switch over to this for you real quick. Okay, so Northeast Bassin. He said 25 pounds easy on this lake. I think that's what he's saying. Anyways, here's some spots. Just give you a look at some spots here. Someone's been marking up like crazy. This looks really good right here, just off the top of my head. There's a nice little shallow point. I don't know if it actually is a shallow. These Navionics maps aren't always super accurate, but that off the tip of this point, this little saddle looks great. I would check that out. Right here with like a jig or a crankbait. This little channel swing right here off this point on both sides. This point right here looks really good. I'd be cranking that and throwing a jerkbait down that. That looks really juicy. See here. This point right here looks really good. There's a creek channel that feeds into this pocket, and so if those fish are in their pre-spawn mode, they're going to set up right off this point. It's a little bit shallow up on top, and you can catch them probably on a Carolina rig or a jerkbait off into this little point. Same with this right here. So we're down by the dam. All these little points right here look really good. If there's some like brush or something off in these points and the fish are still in that early pre-spawn mode, I would be fishing a football jig out here in 20 to 25 foot down by the dam off these points. That looks really good. Moving back in this creek, let's see here. this channel swing right here looks really good. This channel swings up right against here with 30 foot of water, and then it starts to taper off. And so I would be fishing this with a jerkbait. And then there's just a bunch of these little shallow points. I might just, the lake's small enough, you can probably just run every little point that has deep water right, running up against it with a football jig, with an Alabama rig, and with a jerkbait. This point right here looks juicy. So that's what I'd be doing. Again, fishing the bridges. I would fish all around those bridges. And then if the water's rising, maybe get up a little bit shallower, fish shallow brush, spinnerbait, stuff like that. So anyways, that was my quick little look at one of the lakes. So that's pretty much it for the night. That's all I had time for. Brian says, Neely Henry, I have a tournament this weekend. Brian, since you have a tournament this weekend, I'll stay on just a second longer. We'll look at Neely Henry. I got a little bit extra time, so we'll look at Neely Henry just for a second. I'll keep the stream going for a little bit longer. Just take a look. Neely Henry's a really good lake. I've heard great things. What part of the river system is it part of? Is it part of like... Yeah, it's part of... Oh, yeah, Logan Martin. Neely Henry's part of that. So I actually fished a tournament on Logan Martin a while ago. A real long time ago, actually. Like 10, 12 years ago for a junior world championship on Logan Martin. And so Neely Henry's pretty similar. It has some docks. It has some really good... I think it has grass in it, potentially. I don't know. But what I would do is I would probably just pick one creek in this lake. And I'm just going to take a big look. This creek looks too big. I would pick this creek right here. Just off the top of my head. Maybe look down here. I don't know if I like to look at that one. I don't know if I like to look at that one either. Maybe this one. No, I like this creek the best right here. I would go to, I'm jumping around like crazy, guys. But anyways, I'll go to this creek right here. And the reason I like it is, I don't know, it looks good to me. It just caught my eye. One thing I really like about it right away is that it has some nice creek channels that run in. And you can see this creek channel kind of bounces around through this pocket. And so right here on Neely Henry is the main river channel. And so what these fish are going to do is they're going to move off this main river and then move back into these creeks up into the shallow water area, and they're going to try to spawn back up in this whole flat. And so what I would do is I would kind of try to target some of these channel swing banks in here with the flooded timber, fishing an Alabama rig, fishing a jerkbait down these channel swing banks through here. And then I would kind of follow, like, here's a little creek channel that runs in. I would follow this creek channel over to this point, maybe skip some of these docks, maybe fish a jerkbait out in front of these docks. That's a really good pattern out on Logan Martin. And then again, just kind of working my way down this bank. There's a nice channel swing that swings up here and then it swings back out around. So I would think this little stretch of the creek could be really good. Same with this little stretch. That creek swings in and then swings back out, so it swings in and out. You can see the little creek lines here. So I would fish this little spot right here, maybe crank this little stretch of docks, fish jerkbait, and same thing, the whole thing. I'll just kind of follow the creek channel and fish all the banks where that creek channel swings up against it. And then if they're not actually back up in the creek, what I would do is move back out to the main river here, and I would kind of get on the edge of this main river channel. And a couple spots I like is like this little spot right out here. There's a nice little hump that sticks out, and there's a creek channel that swings in, and if that water isn't running too hard, the current's not too strong, I could see some big Neely Henry spotted bass pulling up on a spot like this, right where that creek channel ledge is off this little hump. And I would check that out for sure. Just stop and graph over it and see if you can find some spots over the top of that. And then there's a bunch of good stuff. I wish I had a little more time to look at that, but hopefully that gave you an idea of some stuff to look at up shallower and maybe you saw a little bit deeper. So anyways, let's see here. We're running a little bit over, but I'll finish the rest of these questions up, and then I've got to get going. Got to get to work at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, so I need to get ready for that. But anyways, he said, what am I majoring in school? During my undergrad, I got my undergrad in economics and supply chain management. I got a double major, and I minored in Spanish. And then right now I'm just getting my MBA, and I'm focusing in marketing just to kind of give myself a little bit more exposure into every facet of business. And it's also good to know about marketing for YouTube. And if this is going to be a potential future career, who knows? So could be good to know. Brian Taylor says I'm a high school. It's a high school fishing tournament, so hopefully that helped you out, Brian, a little bit. Again, I didn't really get to dig into this. Normally I dig into these lakes a little bit more, so that may have not been the best suggestion ever, but that's kind of just at a 10-second glance the first creek I looked at. Gary says, yes, it's best way to learn, but sometimes you don't have time to figure out what the fish are doing. Where is that? Baston Tim. I don't know if I saw that comment. Yeah, seriously, let people figure out bass fishing out for themselves, dude. Best way to learn. I think that's true. Sometimes it's good to, figure out bass fishing on your own, but at the same time, it does help to get some tips from people, get some guidance, and, there's one thing with like high school fishing and with junior fishing. A lot of people used to, in my club, would fish with their dads every tournament, and their dads would just take them to the spot, give them a rod, say cast right here, and they never learned how to fish by themselves. And so when they got out of high school, they would do super well in these junior tournaments, and then they go to college and think they were going to win all these tournaments and be amazing, and then they had to go find fish by themselves on lakes that they were unfamiliar with, and they couldn't find them. And then, like in my case, I never had anyone telling me where to fish. I always just looked for spots on my own. I never got help from really anybody. Maybe a boat captain would say, let's go fish this bank over here, but like I never fished with any sticks. So I had to figure it out all on my own. And so by the time I got to college, I was doing pretty well in college tournaments just because I had figured out how to fish it by myself and not, been taken to a spot by someone and shown exactly where to fish. And so my goal with this channel isn't to show you guys exactly where to fish, but give you the tools necessary to figure out where to fish and break down the lake yourself and kind of make an educated guess on what spots to fish. So again, some of the spots I show on the stream might not be the best spots on the lake, but hopefully the knowledge and the thought process is sticking with you and you can kind of apply it on your lake and know how I kind of break down the lake when I go to a new spot. So Baston Tim, I do agree. Yeah, no one can tell you where to fish at any particular time. I do agree that. And he says, yeah, and that's why you're a great angler. So that's a good thing. So I wouldn't take anything I'm saying, but at the same time, it's good to get some spots, take a look at it, and especially if you can take a spot that I'm fishing and you can go try it out. Like let's say you're from Arkansas and you go to the exact spot I'm fishing. It might be helpful to go actually fish a spot I'm fishing and say, oh, that's what it looks like. That's what this bank looks like. That's what it looks like on the graph. And then you can replicate that around the lake and find new spots because it's really hard to catch other people's fish. That's one thing I've always found myself. If I have someone take a map and point out a spot on a map for me, 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to catch fish there. It's always spots that look similar to it, and it's stuff that I find on my own. And so, again, I'm going off on a big tangent on this, but hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully y'all enjoyed the stream, and hopefully we are able to, I'm able to help you guys learn a little bit more about fishing. So kind of got off on a weird tangent at the end there, but anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the stream. There's still 50 people on, which is amazing. Had the highest participation in the stream ever today, longest stream ever today, but either way, hope you all enjoyed the stream, and I'll be doing these weekly, hopefully from here on out. I might have to skip a couple weeks here and there, but I'm also going to try to post these in advance, well in advance, like 4 or 5 days in advance like I did this time. So keep sending in your lakes. You can send your lakes to fishthemoment1@gmail.com with all the information in the bottom right corner of the screen. And thanks for all the people who donated tonight, which were John Bolton, Keith Burwell, Brian Barthelt, Bruce Clayton, Therminator Fishing, Alejandro, and Bex. So thank you so much for the donations, and thanks so much for all your participation in the stream and talking. So hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.